direct your attention to this picture, and I'll describe, or I'll talk about it later, where it came from. All right, so containers, right? I mean, we use them to ship goods all over the world, but they're being utilized for other things now too. Homes, pools. Actually, this is the first time I've ever seen a pool, but this is a thing, I suppose. Bars. I brought my beer up just in case I would need it. Hydroponic systems. This is actually a company that's wanting to make shrimp, and they're making these as individual units so it can be scaled. This is actually a fish farm in a container. So using them for all kinds of different things. Lobster larval culture. Also have lobster nursery culture in these things. So why not oysters? So we actually built our first one of these in 2015. It was really meant to check out some different sites for our main hatchery, but we've created some different systems. There it goes. We've created some different systems and really have been able to miniaturize what we do in our big hatchery. And so this has high density live feed. We're producing algae in a hanging bag system that, with all the species combined, we're harvesting at somewhere between 12 and 15 million cells per mil. That's high enough density to service the rest of this facility. We have static early larvae culture and then high density flow through late larvae culture. This was the nature of a USDA SBIR, and we've developed a high density setting system. So we're setting oysters on a fraction of the space, feed, water flow that's typically required. And so by doing that, we can close the entire life cycle into a small footprint like this and still have a facility that has, like I mentioned earlier today, commercially relevant production. So a small portable oyster hatchery that can have meaningful impact in the industry, we think. So this is the latest one we've built. We've built 4 now. This one is in Texas, just a couple of pictures. We actually have a virtual walkthrough at our booth if you want to see it. This is the team that put these together. Rick, the guy second from left, is a bit of an artist, and I laugh out loud almost every time I see this image. But that's Josh Wolfson, Rick Galat, Stan Allen, and myself that have been working on putting these together. So thanks, guys.
Oh, all right. Do y'all want me to announce times as we go? All right.
Yes.
So he finished in a whopping 2 minutes and 37 seconds. Go, Mike. Setting that bar high. All right, so next up we have Niles Lundquist. I completely butchered that, so I'll let him say his name. And he's going to talk about oyster catcher tables for creating oyster habitat.
Well, it's great to be here. And so I'm Niels Lindquist. And so what I want to do is tell you about a project that was funded in part with a small grant award from the TNC Pew supporting aquaculture for restoration program. So what this involved doing was creating these table-like structures out of oyster catcher, which is our cloth cement composite hardscape. And so what we did with this project is manufacture 600 of these tables. Then we deployed them over about 450 feet of this lease that we have intertidal in the New River, North Carolina, to create these 2 parallel rows of reef structure. So you can see on the left the manufactured tables as we were putting them out to be deployed. So we'll sink those down to the desired depth, and now we have these 2 rows of tables for reef tables, and these are being used to support other oyster catcher materials for seeding, and they will also catch a lot of oyster spat and grow some pretty amazing reefs along the trajectory of what we've done with some of our other intertidal leases in North Carolina. So up in the upper left-hand picture, you'll see a lease that's on an intertidal sandbar that we started working on in 2015 with Clammerhead. Some of you might know him. And over time, with oyster catcher deployments, what you see there is the reef, the intertidal reef that has developed from that oyster catcher deployment. It's been really amazing what kind of intertidal reefs we can develop there. Those reefs have accumulated sediment to the point that we can actually plant Spartina, so we've converted the sand flat into an intertidal oyster reef. And we are using this as a permanent oyster habitat for sustainable harvest of oysters for food and for restoration. And for the restoration benefit, an example is from this small lease, about 3/4 of an acre, we've harvested between 2020 and 2022 approximately 1,200 bushels of oysters for the New River Oyster Highway project. So if you don't know about it, it would be interesting for you to check it out and see what we're doing on a fairly large-scale, estuarine-wide restoration project. Thank you.
All right, y'all, that's going to be hard to beat. That was 2 minutes flat. I think we need to start a 2-minute tech talk competition because, man. All right, so next up we have Eric Schlegenhoff. All right. And he's going to talk about revolutionizing floating oyster culture with the Sepa Revo system. Let's make sure I hold it close.
Yeah, got it. Yeah, thanks everybody. So I'm with Sepa. I think people really think about Sepa as an intertidal culture company. We've been making baskets for over 20 years. And when we talk about revolutionizing floating culture, we're revisiting it. And there's some great products out there, and we kind of want to take our own take on it. And so this is the Revo. It is a surface culture system, and right now this is in beta testing. We're going to be bringing it to the States, doing some trials. I'll show you a couple of the features real quick. So it's all plastic, but real quick. Thank you. So the basket, you're able to remove the basket with just the pull of a handle, take it off your float. And then the hub, what stays on the line, also comes apart. So you can thread the whole system onto the line in the middle. So if there's ever a problem, if there's a breakage in your repair, fouling that you need to deal with in the middle of your line, you can remove the whole system in the middle and then reattach. Additionally, the hub itself, well, beta, removes from the line. So potentially if you've got a big storm coming, you can take the float off in a simple move. Yeah, that's the gist of it. We've done a couple other things. The float is filled with foam instead of air. We don't want the expansion and contraction in the heat of the sun to put pinholes in the float, so it should always be out there. There's all sorts of other little things. I'm still around later on this afternoon. If you have questions, want to check it out in more depth, come talk to me. Thank you.
All right. Oh my gosh. Just when you think it couldn't be done. 1 minute and 54 seconds. I'm just saying. I know, man. We're going to have some extra time for happy hour. I know, right? Is Andrea scary or something? Like, all right. So next up, let's call up John Pelley, who is with the University of Georgia Shellfish Lab here. And he is going to tell you about the ogre, or the oyster go-round.
It walks, it talks. Sorry. It walks, it talks, it crawls on its belly like a reptile. All right, those are some of the rumors going around about this new cage flipping contraption that we've come up with. And we call it the Oyster go-round, and we shorten that to ogre. The ogre was spawned in the UGA Shellfish Lab by a Georgia Tech graduate on his lunch break. All right, he was on his lunch break and made this thing. Okay, so we're ready to go. Some of you guys got to see this Thursday on the tour, the hatchery tour, and we made a short little video for those who couldn't see it to show you what the ogre can do. Okay. A typical cycle of the ogre. Now you start with the flip table at the bottom of the ivy. It will be engaged or locked in place. What you do is position the cage over and center it against the cage bumpers on the ogre. And then you hit the up switch for the winch, which raises the flip table. It comes up under the cage, lifts the cage out of the water. You bring it up to a desired height. There's a sweet spot where it flips just right and it kind of slings the oysters across the cage to spread them out for drying. So once you get to that right spot, you pull the table release latch and the cage flips. The ogre will flip the cage up and down sizes and types of oyster cages. Here, the cage is empty. That's because we didn't have any little cages that we could fill. What I like about the Over is the fact that it is portable. You can rotate the Over out of the water, set it in your boat while you run from the hill out to the farm and back. We have designed this to fit just about any boat because the adjustments are telescoping, so different size cages, different types of boats, you should be able to adjust it to make it work. We are looking for fabricators who might be interested in manufacturing. If you know of someone or you yourself are interested, contact me. I've got contact information now. Take any questions.
Right. He did his in 2:48, so still under 3 minutes. Way to go, John Pelley. All right, next up we have Mr. Frank Milchuk. Are you here? There he is. All right, and he's going to talk to you about earth anchoring systems for oyster aquaculture.
Thanks, everybody. Appreciate being here. If you'll go to the first what we do sign. Basically, we're an earth anchoring manufacturer. We've been doing this for 40 years in all kinds of industries around the world. And it's there. It's not there, though.
Yeah, got it.
You got it? And it just gives you an idea of some of the applications where we work. You know, retaining walls, slope stabilization, tree earth anchoring, pipeline buoyancy, utilities, vineyards, you name it. One day I'm riding in my boat down the waterway and a couple young cats out playing around in the water, and I got interested. And I'm like, what are you doing? And they're here today. But anyway, well, we're oyster farmers. I'm like, huh, okay, that's cool. So I asked questions, and lo and behold, that's how I got where I am today. Just a couple years ago is when this happened, and you can go on to the next one. Gives you an idea of how the earth anchor works. And when they started telling me how they do things, I'm like, oh, that doesn't seem right. Let me show you how we do things. So this is how we do. We drive an anchor in the ground and with a drive rod, and we pull out the drive rod, and we pull back on the anchor by some fashion, and it rotates in the soil, and it holds something. There's a lot of science behind that, and we could talk about that, but you'd get really bored. But anyway, it's a very simple thing to do. People can do it from their boat, from waist deep water. However, we can apply it to almost any kind of farm you have going on. So anyway, I got a bunch of dorks in my office, so I had them put together the next slide. And I figured I'm going to apply this to oyster farming. And you might have seen this at my booth. And you can do this out of a boat or walking around, and you don't have to get wet. You can string together multi-section drive steel. You can drive the anchor to depth. You pull it out, pull out the drive steel, and quite simply, you could actually hook onto this with your boat, give it a tug to set the anchor, and you're done. You don't even have to get wet. That's kind of how it works. That's a concept. We're a manufacturer located in Raleigh, North Carolina. Everything is built in America, in Raleigh. And as an engineering-based firm, we can look at all scenarios and come up with a solution specific to your farm if necessary. That's about it.
Very nice. Thank you, Frank. You're going to have to give me a minute. I don't Mac well.
Minutes and 30 seconds.
Look at that. Man. All right, so next up we have Andy De Paola with Angelo De Paola Consulting and his lovely wife, Diane. She's going to be your Vanna White for the day. They are going to tell you about Andy's new laboratory method to test for Vibrio bacteria in oyster mantle fluids. So we'll give them a minute to get all set up.
Ready.
Okay. So anybody that's been around me knows that I usually do the talking and let somebody else do the work. So in this case, we have a biphasic medium that was developed in collaboration with FDA, Dr. Jessica Jones and Dr. Tejo Kim who was a microbiologist at Mississippi State and had a Sea Grant. And so biphasic, this is like a TCBS place, a selected differential medium, has arabinose in it, which Vibrio perihemolyticus ferments and it turns yellow. I don't know that you can see that back here. But all you have to do is add alkaline peptone water. So now it's biphasic. It has a solid and a liquid phase. So now that she has that loaded up, I'm going to shuck an oyster, and hopefully I won't mess this up. Ugh.
Don't cut yourself.
Yeah, there we go. So what she's going to do is run a 3-2 most probable number. And we would normally take a dozen of these and blend them up. But Vibrio perihemolyticus has a similar concentration in the mantle fluid, the liquor, as it does in the meat. Hold your horses. Don't make me later. Okay. So she's putting 3 aliquots of 100 microliters in the first 3. And that's a detection of less than 3. The next one, row, damn, she's fast. Okay. She's not a microbiologist, but, she's not doing too bad. As I look at the time, it doesn't look like we're going to break any records. Come on, chop, chop, baby. Don't make Andrea come after you. Okay, we're down to the grind. So the 10 microliter section is a amount that's, if those are all negative, that's less than 30. And NSSP actually thinks that's a non-detectable level for labeling. And so what you're doing now? Oh, no, she's already on the 1 microliter. And it looks like we're going to finish in the nick of time. All right.
That would be the first for you.
So we brought this over to Taylor Shellfish, and their oyster shucker, we trained them in about the same amount of time Diane just did there. And they did 1,200 samples in 3 months, which is more Vibrio testing than I did in 35 years working for FDA. Anyway, thank you.
I think Andy knows me very well to know that I will definitely cut him off. So good job, Andy. I know. I think that is the first time I haven't had to walk him off. So
That's because I was here.
that's right, Diane. You keep him in line.
Okay, they say you can't test the same oyster.
Hey, your 3 minutes. Oh dear. Oh. Well, we'll know later if that had Vibrio in there or not. All right, so next up, we're going to welcome up Tyler Chadwick. He is with Carolina Gold Oyster Company, and he was fortunate enough to get a peer-to-peer grant from Oyster South, so he is going to tell you about that trip. You can hit this.
This one working?
That one works too. Yep.
Yeah. All right, so I'll try to make this fast. But in February, I was able to make a trip to Taylor Shellfish and Hama Hama Oyster Company, and I was blessed enough to receive a grant from Oyster South, which I'm grateful for. We actually originally only were going to visit Taylor Shellfish, and then we stopped by Hama Hama's, and they were so grateful and invited us in, and we spent the day there too. So we went to Taylor Shellfish, and what I really wanted to learn is we're a small farm in North Carolina, and I'm looking at expanding our operations, and I was having a hard time wrapping my mind around it, so I wanted to visit them to see how they did it. And I've got it condensed down into 2 major things that I learned. I learned a lot more, so come talk to me after the 3-minute tech talk. But the first thing that I learned is how important wet storage is. According to Bill Taylor with Taylor Shellfish, it increases their shelf life by 2 weeks. So that is something that we're really going to look into implementing in our operation. And that was the first thing that we learned. This is Taylor. The picture you see here is Taylor Shellfish. The picture doesn't do it justice. It is a huge facility, and they're actually getting ready to build a second building like this to do more wet storage. Each one of these containers here hold between 5,000 and 8,000 oysters, so you can do the math there. The second thing that I learned is diversification, and I know that might sound simple, right? But I think as oyster farmers, a lot of times we get in the same routine, as in selling to the same sources and not really using our potential resources that we have. So I've listed a few things, and seed is one thing I really wanted to point out with Taylor Shellfish. They control their whole entire life cycle of their oyster. So they are their hatchery, their nursery. It's really impressive. So that was something I learned a lot about. I have oodles of pictures of their algae buildings, not room, and I'd be more than happy to show you. So crops, seeds, selling channels, and then Mr. Bill Taylor really pushed hard on using your existing resources to kind of grow your operation. And the last thing I want to share is I asked Mr. Bill Taylor, what advice would you give to a farmer that's wanting to expand their resource or their scale up their production? And you guys can read. But one thing that was very important to me is he says, never let a mistake go to waste. He says, learn from that mistake and use that to your resource. So anyway, I know it's real short and fast to the point, but come talk to me afterwards. How did I do?
That was 3 minutes on the dot. She was ready, man. We might have to let her do it at the end, just to get it out. Yeah. All right, next up we have Corey Devine from Zapco Aquaculture.
Hi there, my name's Corey Devine, and I represent Submerged Oyster Farming Equipment. We have a new bag. Your standard square mesh bag, but it's different from anything else that's on the market. It comes pre-cut, pre-creased, pre-folded, with your closure pegs, closure pins, a lanyard, and your lanyard already attached. Now, the beautiful thing of this, it only takes about a minute and a half to assemble. And I'd like to do that right now.
Just so y'all know, we're timing him.
Total, there are 5 closure pins. And there's your finished bag.
All right. So my correction, he is with Submerge and not Zapco. So, all right. Last but not least, we have Natalie Anderson and Leslie Sturmer from the University of Florida, and they are going to talk to you about reevaluating the co-culture of oysters with urchins. Do you want to hold or put it up?
This is the picture that wowed oyster growers at Oyster South Symposium in 2020 when Bill Walton gave preliminary results of the co-culture of oysters with urchins, serving as rumbas.
So the next steps were to reevaluate the practicalities of this. along with looking at the use of hatchery-produced juveniles as opposed to wild source urchins.
The closed system hatchery for urchins at the University of Alabama was to produce the juveniles. They were unable to do so due to a variety of reasons.
Instead, wild juvenile urchins were collected from Port St. Joe Bay, and they were stocked with R6 oysters in 4mm floating bags to evaluate field nursery co-culture at 3 Florida locations.
In Cedar Key, where oyster farms are located in open water conditions, wind-driven waves, very stressful to juvenile urchins, no surviving urchins after 3 weeks. At Oyster Bay, salinities during last summer were 20 parts per thousand or lower. Again, stressful conditions for juvenile urchins, no surviving urchins after 3 weeks.
Alligator Harbor was the only leased site where the urchins performed well with 100% survival after 19 days. This is a harbor, it's well protected and has high steady salinities. However, after 2 months, the urchin survival decreased to about 36%, and this was due to the presence of blue crabs inside of the bags.
Yeah, the bags weren't worked. So the next step was to again go back and wild collect juvenile urchins, now stocked in 9mm bags, floating bags, with oysters that were reaching 2 inches in size or a little bit more. Urchin density varied from 10 to 20 per bag, as well as float placement on the bag.
Now, after 14 weeks, urchin survival in bags where the floats were placed on top was high at 87 to 98%, and lowest in bags where the floats were placed on the side at 53%. Growth was similar across the board, and in terms of oysters, we had high commercially acceptable survival and growth.
In terms of biofouling, the urchins were able to keep oysters clean of a matrix of tube-building amphipods and accumulating sediments. Barnacles, pre-existing barnacles on treatment E oysters were reduced by about 35% during that 14-week period.
So what's next? We are currently evaluating the use of adult urchins serving as polishers to already fouled oysters, reaching market size in the next 2 to 3 months. We have deployed these at 3 locations and hope to have results soon. Thank you.